On a warm evening in Kolinda, the four friends, Kato, Jabari, Amani, and Baraka, gathered in their usual spot. The tavern was alive with music and chatter, but their attention was drawn to the small bakery across the street. Kato, ever the risk-taker, spotted Zoe, a humble baker, and a mischievous idea sparked in his mind. He dared his friends, confident in his charm. Jabari's challenge followed swiftly, leading to the infamous bet. Kato was to woo Zoe, marry her for 6 months, and in return, his friends would finance his dream vacation. The game had begun. Kato strode across the street, his silk robes flowing behind him. Zoe, busy with a customer, barely glanced up as he entered her shop. The sweet scent of freshly baked bread filled the air, but Kato's mind was only on Zoe. She was different, her simplicity stood in stark contrast to the woman he was used to. He tried his usual charm, but Zoe remained unimpressed, handing him a loaf of bread with a polite smile before turning back to her work. For the first time, Kato realized that this bet might be harder than he thought. Undeterred by Zoe's indifference, Kato returned to the bakery the next day. He complimented her bread, asked about her life, and attempted to engage her in conversation. But Zoe, ever focused on her work, gave him short, polite answers. She was not interested in his wealth or his status. Kato, however, was intrigued. He had never met someone so unaffected by his charm. As he left the bakery that day, Kato realized that this was not just a bet anymore. Zoe had become a puzzle he was determined to solve. Kato, used to winning women over with extravagant gifts, decided to shower Zoe with presents. Fine fabrics, jewelry, and perfumes were sent to her bakery, each one more expensive than the last. But Zoe remained cautious. She had worked hard for everything she had, and she wasn't easily swayed by material things. She accepted the gifts politely but made it clear that they would not change her mind about him. Kato was frustrated, but something about Zoe's independence only made him more determined to win her over. Realizing that his usual methods weren't working, Kato decided to change his approach. Instead of extravagant dinners and expensive gifts, he invited Zoe on simpler outings, walks in the park, visits to local food stalls, and quiet picnics by the river. Slowly, Zoe began to open up to him. She shared stories of her childhood, her dreams for her bakery, and the struggles she had faced. Kato listened, and for the first time in his life, he felt truly connected to someone. Zoe's world was simple, but it was also filled with warmth and sincerity. Back at the tavern, Kato's friends were relentless in their teasing. Jabari, Amani, and Baraka mocked him, asking how his little baker was doing. They laughed, reminding him that this was all a game, a bet that he had to win. At first, Kato laughed along with them, but as his feelings for Zoe grew, the joke started to sting. Kato found himself torn between his growing affection for Zoe and the lingering shame of how their relationship had started. He knew that he would have to come clean eventually, but the fear of losing her kept him silent. As the days passed, Kato's guilt began to weigh heavily on him. He had started his relationship with Zoe as a game, a careless bet with his friends, but now, it felt like so much more. He enjoyed spending time with her, and for the first time in his life, he felt real happiness. But the shadow of the bet loomed over him, and he knew that the longer he kept the truth from her, the harder it would be to confess. Every moment with Zoe felt bittersweet, as Kato wrestled with his growing affection for her and the secret that threatened to tear them apart. Zoe, too, began to feel unsure about her relationship with Kato. Despite his kindness and the time they spent together, something didn't feel right. She noticed the way his eyes would sometimes wander when they were in public, and she couldn't shake the feeling that he was hiding something. Zoe had always been cautious with her heart, and she feared that Kato, with his wealth and charm, might not be serious about her. One evening, after a quiet dinner, Zoe told Kato that she needed some time to think. Kato, caught off guard, felt a pang of fear. He couldn't lose her now. Determined not to lose Zoe, Kato began to put even more effort into their time together. He stopped focusing on impressing her with material things and instead focused on getting to know her better. They spent long afternoons talking about their hopes and dreams, and Kato found himself sharing parts of his life that he had never shared with anyone before. Zoe, in turn, began to trust him more, and their bond deepened. Kato realized that he was no longer interested in winning the bet. He was falling in love with Zoe, and the thought of losing her terrified him. As the weeks went by, Kato and Zoe's relationship flourished. They spent more time together, and Kato found himself drawn to the simplicity of Zoe's life. She taught him to appreciate the small things, a quiet evening by the river, the joy of baking bread, the warmth of a shared meal. Kato, who had once lived for luxury and excitement, found a new kind of happiness in these simple moments. He began to see the world through Zoe's eyes, and in doing so, he realized that his old life no longer satisfied him. But even as their love blossomed, the secret of the bet hung over him, a dark cloud that threatened to destroy everything. Jabari, Amani, and Baraka noticed the change in Kato. He no longer bragged about his conquests or reveled in their wild bets. Instead, he spoke fondly of Zoe, and his once carefree attitude had been replaced with a sense of responsibility. His friends, however, didn't share his newfound maturity. They still saw Zoe as nothing more than part of a game, and they continued to tease Kato about the bet. "Don't forget," Amani reminded him one evening, "the bet's almost up. 6 months, and you'll have your prize." Kato, feeling the weight of their words, realized that he had to make a choice, confess the truth to Zoe or risk losing her forever. The night before the 6-month mark, Kato couldn't sleep. The guilt had become unbearable, and he knew he couldn't keep the secret from Zoe any longer. The next morning, he went to the bakery, his heart heavy with dread. Zoe greeted him with a smile, but Kato could barely look her in the eye. He knew that what he was about to say could ruin everything. Taking a deep breath, he told her the truth about the bet. Zoe's face fell, and Kato could see the hurt in her eyes. "It was all a game to you?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Zoe was devastated by Kato's confession. She had opened her heart to him, and now she felt betrayed. "I trusted you," she said, tears filling her eyes. "And all this time, you were just playing a game." Kato tried to explain, telling her that his feelings had changed, that he truly loved her now. But Zoe couldn't hear him. The pain of his betrayal was too much. She asked him to leave, and Kato, heartbroken, walked away, unsure if he would ever see her again. Days turned into weeks, and Kato found himself lost without Zoe. He had once been surrounded by wealth and luxury, but now, none of it mattered. He missed Zoe's laughter, her warmth, and the simple joy of being with her. His friends, noticing his misery, tried to cheer him up, but Kato wanted nothing to do with their games anymore. He realized that he had lost the most important thing in his life, and he didn't know how to get it back. One afternoon, Kato returned to the bakery, hoping to see Zoe. But when he arrived, the bakery was closed. He asked around, and the villagers told him that Zoe had taken some time off to be with her family in a small village far from Kolinda. Kato's heart sank. He had come to apologize again, to explain himself more clearly, but now she was gone. Without her, the bakery felt lifeless, and Kato felt the weight of his mistake more deeply. He realized just how much Zoe had become the center of his world. Kato spent the following days in deep reflection. His once carefree life now felt hollow. He wandered around Kolinda, visiting places he used to enjoy, but they no longer brought him any pleasure. His heart ached for Zoe, and the guilt over how he had treated her weighed heavily on his mind. He began to question everything: his friendship with Jabari, Amani, and Baraka, his previous lifestyle, and the values he once held dear. For the first time in his life, Kato wondered what kind of man he truly wanted to be. As Kato wrestled with his guilt, he found himself spending more time helping in the market. He started volunteering at small shops, learning about the hard work that people like Zaid did every day. He even began baking bread himself, working alongside an old baker who reminded him of Zaid's dedication. The more he worked, the clearer his mind became. Kato realized that he needed to change, not just for Zaid, but for himself. His wealth and status no longer held the same importance. He wanted to be someone worthy of Zaid's love and trust. Kato's transformation didn't go unnoticed. Jabari, Amani, and Baraka grew concerned as they watched their once spirited friend withdraw from their usual games and bets. One evening, they confronted him at the tavern. "What's happened to you, Kato?" Jabari asked with a mocking tone. "You're not the same. This little baker has changed you too much." But instead of laughing along, Kato stood firm. "Maybe I've changed for the better," he replied. "I've wasted too much time on meaningless things. Zaid made me realize that." His friends were shocked by his seriousness, but Kato no longer cared what they thought. Determined to make things right, Kato set out to find Zaid. He knew she had gone to her family's village, but it was far from Kolinda, and the journey would take several days. Still, Kato was resolute. With little more than a bag of essentials and the determination in his heart, he left the city behind. The road was long and difficult, but Kato didn't mind. With each step, he felt a sense of purpose that he hadn't felt before. He was ready to face Zaid and prove to her that his love was real. After days of travel, Kato finally reached Zaid's village. It was a small, quiet place nestled in the hills, far removed from the noise and chaos of Kolinda. As he walked through the village, he asked the locals about Zaid, and they pointed him toward her family's home. Kato's heart raced as he approached her house. He didn't know how Zaid would react to seeing him again, but he knew he had to try. He knocked on the door, his heart pounding in his chest, and waited. When Zaid opened the door and saw Kato standing there, her eyes widened in surprise. "Kato," she asked, disbelief in her voice. She had not expected to see him here, especially after everything that had happened. Kato, his voice full of sincerity, explained why he had come. "Zaid, I made a terrible mistake, and I'm so sorry. I've changed, and I want to prove to you that my love is real." Zaid looked at him, her expression unreadable. "You hurt me, Kato," she said softly. "I don't know if I can trust you again." Kato knew that winning back Zaid's trust wouldn't be easy, but he was willing to do whatever it took. He asked her if he could stay and help her family with their work. At first, Zaid was hesitant, but she could see the genuine remorse in Kato's eyes. Reluctantly, she agreed. Over the next few days, Kato worked alongside Zaid and her family. He helped gather firewood, tended to the animals, and even assisted Zaid's grandmother in the kitchen. Each task was a small step toward rebuilding the trust he had broken. As Kato worked with Zaid and her family, he began to see life in a new way. The simplicity of the village, the close-knit community, and the way people helped each other without expecting anything in return touched him deeply. He realized that true wealth wasn't measured in gold or possessions but in relationships, kindness, and hard work. It was a lesson Zaid had been trying to teach him all along, and now, Kato finally understood. He no longer cared about his former life of luxury, he only wanted to build a meaningful life with Zaid by his side. Although Kato was making an effort to change, Zaid remained cautious. She watched him from a distance, unsure if his transformation was real or just another act. She had seen men like Cato before, men who promised the world but ultimately left when things got difficult. Zoe's heart had been hurt once, and she wasn't ready to open it again so easily. But as the days passed, she couldn't help but notice the sincerity in Cato's actions. He wasn't just talking, he was showing her, through his hard work and dedication, that he was serious about changing. One evening, the village held a festival to celebrate the harvest season. There was music, dancing, and plenty of food. Zoe, dressed in her finest clothes, looked radiant as she joined her family in the celebration. Cato, seeing her smile, felt a warmth in his heart. He asked her to dance, and after a moment of hesitation, Zoe agreed. As they danced under the stars, Cato realized how much he had come to love her, and not because of the bet, but because of who she was. For the first time in a long while, Zoe allowed herself to enjoy the moment, her heart cautiously opening. Despite their shared moments during the festival, Zoe's doubts lingered. She couldn't forget how their relationship had started, and the pain of Cato's betrayal still haunted her. Late at night, she would lie awake, wondering if she could truly trust him again. Cato, sensing her unease, tried to reassure her, but he knew that words alone wouldn't be enough. He needed to show her, every day, that he was committed to the simple, honest life she cherished. But the question remained, could Zoe's heart fully heal from the wound he had caused? One morning, as the sun rose over the hills, Zoe made a decision. She invited Cato to join her on a walk through the village, and as they strolled through the quiet streets, she spoke from her heart. Cato, she began, I can see that you've changed. But trust isn't something that can be rebuilt overnight. It will take time and patience. Cato listened intently, nodding. I'm here for the long haul, Zoe, he said. I'm willing to wait as long as it takes. Zoe smiled softly, a small glimmer of hope shining in her eyes. It wasn't a full reconciliation, but it was a start. After spending several weeks in the village, Cato and Zoe decided to return to Colinda. Zoe missed her bakery, and Cato wanted to show her that he was serious about building a life with her in the city. But as they arrived in Colinda, Cato knew that they would face new challenges. His friends, the city's temptations, and the lingering shadow of the bet still loomed over him. But Cato was determined to prove that he had changed for good. Together, they walked through the city gates, ready to face whatever lay ahead. When Cato and Zoe returned to Colinda, the bustling city felt different from when they had left. Zoe reopened her bakery, and the familiar smell of freshly baked bread filled the air once again. Customers greeted her with warmth, happy to see her back. Cato, meanwhile, spent his days helping Zoe with the bakery, working alongside her as a partner in both life and business. The once flashy lifestyle he had known seemed distant now, and the simple joy of working with Zoe brought him more satisfaction than he had ever imagined. As Zoe's bakery flourished once again, word spread around Colinda about Cato's return. People whispered about how the once wealthy playboy was now spending his days in a humble bakery, working alongside a woman who had nothing to do with his former life of luxury. The gossip reached Cato's old friends, Jabari, Amani, and Baraka, who were baffled by his transformation. They couldn't understand why Cato, who had once been consumed by wealth and status, would now choose a simple life with Zoe. But Cato didn't care about the gossip. For the first time, he felt like he was living a life with real purpose. One afternoon, Cato's old friends paid him a visit at the bakery. They walked in, their fine clothes and smug expressions standing out against the simplicity of the shop. Zoe, busy serving customers, watched as they approached Cato. So, this is your new life? Jabari asked, his voice dripping with sarcasm. Baking bread with your queen? Amani chimed in, chuckling. Kato remained calm, looking them in the eye. "Yes, this is my life now," he said firmly. "And I'm happier than I ever was before." His friends sneered, but Kato didn't flinch. He no longer needed their approval. After the encounter with his friends, Kato felt a renewed sense of commitment to Zoe and their life together. But deep down, he worried that his past might still have a hold on him. He knew that his friends would try to drag him back into their world, tempting him with the wealth and luxury that had once defined him. Kato was determined not to fall into old habits, but the challenge of staying true to his new path weighed heavily on his mind. He realized that his loyalty to Zoe, and to the man he was becoming, would continue to be tested. Zoe, too, was not immune to doubt. She had seen Kato's friends, and although he had stood up to them, she couldn't shake the feeling that they might lure him back into his old life. One evening, she shared her concerns with him. "I believe in the man you've become, Kato," she said quietly, "but I'm afraid that your old life will always try to pull you back. I've seen it happen before." Kato took her hand and looked into her eyes. "Zoe, I've left that life behind. I'm here, with you, because it's where I belong. I won't go back." Just as Kato and Zoe started to settle into their life together, a storm hit Colinda, both literally and metaphorically. Heavy rains flooded the market, and Zoe's bakery was damaged by the rising water. The destruction was devastating, and Zoe was heartbroken as she looked at the mess left behind. Kato immediately sprang into action, helping Zoe clean up and repair the bakery. But the storm brought more than just physical damage. With their business temporarily closed, financial pressures mounted, and Kato began to worry about how they would make ends meet. As Kato and Zoe struggled to rebuild the bakery, Jabari and Amani returned with an offer that tested Kato's resolve. They approached him one evening, offering him a way out of his financial troubles. "Come back to our world, Kato," Jabari said. "You can have it all again, the wealth, the luxury, the power. You don't have to struggle like this." For a moment, Kato was tempted. The thought of returning to the life he had known, where money was never a problem, lingered in his mind. But then he thought of Zoe, of the life they were building together, and he knew what he had to do. Kato looked his friends in the eyes and shook his head. "No," he said firmly. "I'm not going back. I found something more valuable than wealth, something that you'll never understand." Jabari and Amani exchanged glances, clearly disappointed. "You're making a mistake," Amani warned. But Kato stood his ground. "The only mistake would be turning my back on the life I want to live," he replied. With that, he walked away from them, knowing that this would be the final break from his old life. He had chosen his path, and there would be no turning back. With Kato's old friends behind him, he and Zoe focused on rebuilding the bakery. They worked tirelessly, side by side, repairing the damage from the storm. The community in Colinda, seeing their dedication, came together to help. Neighbors brought supplies, offered their labor, and supported Zoe's business in any way they could. Kato was touched by the outpouring of kindness, and he realized that true wealth wasn't something you could measure in gold, it was found in the relationships you built and the love you shared. Slowly but surely, the bakery returned to its former glory. As the bakery reopened, Kato and Zoe's life began to settle into a new rhythm. They had weathered the storm, both the literal one and the emotional challenges they had faced, and came out stronger for it. Kato found joy in the simple, yet fulfilling daily tasks of running the bakery. His hands, once used to luxury, were now callous from hard work, and he couldn't be prouder of the life he was building with Zoe. For the first time, both of them felt that they were truly on the same path, moving forward as partners. With the support of the community and Kato's newfound dedication, Zoe's bakery thrived like never before. The villagers praised Zoe's bread, and word of the bakery's quality spread even beyond Colinda. People from neighboring towns began to visit, eager to taste the famous bread that had become a symbol of perseverance and love. Cato, who had once sought status in the eyes of the wealthy, now found fulfillment in serving the people of Colinda. The bakery had become more than just a business, it was a symbol of the life he and Zoe had built together. One evening, as the sun set over Colinda, Cato took Zoe for a walk by the river. They sat together, watching the water shimmer in the fading light, and Cato felt a deep sense of peace. He had been thinking about this moment for weeks, and now, it felt right. He turned to Zoe, his heart full of love and gratitude. "Zoe," he began, "I've made many mistakes in my life, but loving you isn't one of them. You've changed me in ways I never thought possible. Will you marry me, not because of a bet, but because I want to spend the rest of my life with you?" Zoe looked at Cato, her heart swelling with emotion. She had seen the man he had become, the man who had worked beside her, who had supported her through hard times, and who had proven his love in countless small ways. She knew that the pain of the past had made her stronger, and she had no doubt that Cato's love was genuine. With tears in her eyes, she smiled and whispered, "Yes, Cato. I'll marry you." The two embraced, their hearts full of joy and hope for the future. This time, their love was built on truth, trust, and a shared commitment to each other. The news of Cato and Zoe's engagement spread quickly through Colinda, and the village buzzed with excitement. The couple decided to have a simple wedding, surrounded by the people who had supported them through thick and thin. On the day of the wedding, the marketplace was transformed into a beautiful celebration, with flowers, music, and the smell of freshly baked bread filling the air. Cato's parents, who had always valued wealth and status, were surprised, but ultimately proud, of the man their son had become. As Cato and Zoe exchanged vows, the villagers cheered, celebrating a love that had overcome every obstacle. After the wedding, Cato and Zoe took a short honeymoon to the hills outside Colinda. They stayed in a small cottage, surrounded by nature, far from the noise of the city. It was a time of peace and reflection for both of them. As they wandered through the forests and meadows, they talked about their dreams for the future, children, expanding the bakery, and continuing to build a life rooted in love and honesty. For Cato, the honeymoon was a reminder of how far he had come, and how much he had gained by choosing a life with Zoe. When Cato and Zoe returned to Colinda, they were greeted with open arms by the villagers. The bakery was busier than ever, and the couple threw themselves into their work with renewed energy. They had big plans for the future, including expanding the bakery to serve even more people. Cato, who had once chased wealth for its own sake, now found joy in building something meaningful with Zoe. Together, they made plans to open a second bakery in one of the neighboring towns. The love and respect Cato had earned from the community filled him with a sense of purpose he had never known before. One afternoon, a familiar figure walked into the bakery, Jabari. Cato's old friend looked different, more serious than before. He stood awkwardly at the counter, glancing around at the busy shop filled with happy customers. "Cato," Jabari began, "I came to apologize." Cato was taken aback. Jabari explained how he had been wrong, how watching Cato leave their old life behind had made him realize the emptiness in his own. "You were right to choose this path," Jabari admitted. Cato, though surprised, accepted Jabari's apology. They talked for hours, not about bets or wealth, but about life, growth, and the changes they had both experienced. With the bakery's success, Cato and Zoe were ready to take the next step toward expanding their business. They scouted a location in a nearby town, one known for its thriving marketplace. Zoe wanted to share her bread with more people, while Cato saw the expansion as a way to build a legacy for their future family. They worked together, planning every detail of the new bakery, from the recipes to the layout of the shop. It was a labor of love, and Kato felt grateful every day to have found not only a partner in life but also in business. As they prepared for the opening of their second bakery, Zoe discovered she was pregnant. The news filled their home with joy and excitement. The villagers of Kolinda celebrated with them, eager to welcome a new member into the community. Kato was overjoyed at the thought of becoming a father. He vowed to teach his child the values Zoe had taught him, the importance of kindness, hard work, and living a life grounded in love. The future seemed brighter than ever, and Kato knew that everything they had built together was not just for them, but for the generations to come. Despite the challenges of Zoe's pregnancy, the couple pressed on with their plans to open the second bakery. On opening day, the new bakery was packed with eager customers, many of whom had traveled from Kolinda to show their support. Zoe, glowing with happiness, thanked everyone for their kindness. As Kato watched his wife speak to the crowd, pride swelled in his chest. He thought back to the man he had been when he first met her, shallow, arrogant, and driven by greed. Now, he stood beside her as a man transformed, ready to build a future where love and community were at the center. As the months passed, both bakeries thrived, and Kato and Zoe's influence in the community grew. People began to look up to them not only as successful business owners but as examples of what hard work and love could achieve. They used their success to give back, starting programs to help struggling families in Kolinda and offering jobs to those in need. Kato felt more fulfilled than he ever had in his old life of luxury. He had learned that true wealth was found in the people you helped, the love you shared, and the legacy you left behind. Years later, as Kato and Zoe sat together outside the bakery, watching their children play, they reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. Kato thought about the bet that had once seemed so important, now just a distant memory. It had led him to Zoe, to a life he could have never imagined, but it was no longer the defining moment of his life. Instead, it was the choices he had made after, the decision to change, to be honest, to love truly and deeply, that shaped his future. As the sun set over Kolinda, Kato held Zoe's hand, grateful for every twist and turn in their story. Together, they had built not just a business, but a life rich in love, community, and purpose. And that, they both knew, was the greatest success of all.
Please support us by subscribing, liking, and leaving a comment. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell, so you won't miss our upcoming videos. Your support means the world to us.